going to talk about what does that mean? How do you actually go back and action and put some steps in place to make a lot of what Lynn's talking about that's going to be coming our way a reality. And certainly digital transformation is the foundation of that, and the pandemic put a little bit of gas behind it. This is not just a senior living conversation. Historically, if you pick up a hospital IT magazine, first thing they'll say is, we're really slow in adopting technology. It's healthcare in general. It's not just senior living, it's not just skilled nursing, it's healthcare in general. And we have loads of opportunity to get down the path toward what Lynn is laying out. Here's a statistic. According to a recent Accenture report, 81% of healthcare executives say the pace of digital transformation for their organization is accelerating. I don't know how you all feel, whether or not you feel that's true for your organization or not, but clearly a lot of healthcare executives are feeling this. This model can be really useful for a couple of things. Number one, I don't know if you guys have CIOs in your organization. Maybe you wear the CIO hat, but do you have a tech vision? Do you have a tech plan? Do you have an idea of where you're going, where you want to be? And second, do you have an idea of exactly where you're at? Just a real practical model to help you put your finger on where things are for your organization. First, we start with digitization, and I'm going to go a little bit deeper on that, but these build on each other, and these really are stages. You can't do much without having your data digitized. From there, we can talk about a conversation around standardization. That's a flashpoint for this industry. We're big on consumer choice for very good reasons. We don't want the feds dictating the way we do things. I think the feeling for a long time has been that standardization sends us further down that path. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Then we're going to talk about how that builds the foundation for analytics and insights, interoperability, and last but not least, machine learning. First, digitization. This is simply, does your data exist in a digital, I know this is really exciting stuff, especially a night after Queen. But ask yourself, are you at least at a point where you have the meaningful data that you need digitized? Because if you don't, I'm going to suggest that you're heading down a path where it's going to be increasingly challenging to be competitive. We get it, and I'm not burying the headline. This industry has been built on consumer choice, in brand identity, in brand equity, in making sure that you have the best possible word of mouth out on the street. We've had great conversation about incrementalism and all these other things. All that stuff's completely relevant. This is not the holy grail, but this is 100% a part of your current and future operations. So if you're not all the way there, you'll notice the obvious ones, ADT stuff, core EMR stuff. What about communication? When the pandemic hit, we had a lot of consumers that were having a hard time communicating with families and people outside their communities. There was a real communication void. Having that part of their operation digitalized and automated was a great, great service. We saw organizations really push the envelope in that area. It's not just about family engagement. There's all kinds of things. Care Connect, Cures Act is coming down the path. There's all kinds of reasons and things beyond the traditional IT stuff that you're thinking about that you're going to want to have digitalized. And that sets the table and the foundation for a conversation around standardization. Here's what I'll say about standardization. When the pandemic hit, who controlled the headlines? Media. And what sells papers? Not how great of a job we're doing, the tragedy that's taken place in our communities, which is such a small fraction of the story. But without standardized data, without being able to communicate and tell our own story with evidence and data, we were at the mercy of what the headlines had to communicate. From our organization's perspective, we have a lot of skilled nursing, we have a lot of senior living. On the skilled nursing side, the difference of having standardized data in place is when some of the big associations called and said, can you help us? We got to tell our story on the Hill. We need to get assistance. We need help to get through this thing. We need to be prioritized in the order for all the different supplies and stuff that we need to get through this. We were able to do that in spades, tell their story, and there was a lot of assistance that went their way. When it came to senior living, for us to make the case for senior living, it was a lot more difficult. The headlines demanded the day. That controlled the story. There's a lot of opportunity around standardizing just some common definitions, common metric sets. content and standardizations to drive efficiencies. Lynn said it. Technology is not about adopting, cool stuff that shows up in a brochure. We're in one of the greatest staffing crunches I've experienced in the 25 years that I've been. Staffing, look, typically it's one of the top 3 things we're working on all day, every day. Right now it's different, and I don't have to tell you that. We need to be able to leverage tech to help drive those efficiencies. So that sets the table for what's next, analytics and insights. Once you have your data digitized, again, we're talking about 5 stages. Once you have it digitized, now we can unleash the power of benchmarking. You can compare. If you're a multi-community organization, how about just being able to compare key quality indicators or key business insights and be able to see where you need to send your resources to help. Having those kind of insights can be very powerful and can unleash optimal business results and help you drive quality of care. Benchmarking, at some point, I'm gonna go back to the conversation we started with. We understand in senior living, we built an industry on consumer choice, brand identity, all of that. That is our model, hospitality, service, all that. You are providing healthcare services. And that became an elevated part of the discussion throughout the pandemic. At some point, there's a lot of these entities out there that care about what you're doing. And you need to be able to tell that story. All I'm suggesting is that maybe there's an opportunity to build some other lead sources. Maybe there's an opportunity for you to go and have conversations with payers that look a little bit differently. But in order to do that, you need to show up with data and transparency and be able to show and benchmark and compare and differentiate compared to other people. If you think about let me back up one step. Medicare Advantage, we all know about Medicare Advantage, right? Do you have any idea what percentage we're at today of how many Medicare enrollees are actually enrolled in the Medicare Advantage program? Anybody want to take a guess that's not Lynn?
65%.
We're headed toward that. We're not quite there yet, Steve, but it's a good guess. I think Lynn and I were talking. It's probably somewhere close to 40% today, but we should be north of 50% in a couple of years. What happens when you have Medicare Advantage in the conversation? We're transitioning from a very passive payer, which was CMS, to a very active payer, which are the commercial payers. CMS creates legislation and determines reimbursement once every 5 to 10 years. Commercial payers, they want to see what's going on every week. And what are they looking for? And what are they spending millions of dollars on every day? They are looking at their at-risk enrollees and doing all the stuff that Lynn laid out. They want to know what those social determinants are. They want to know that they're compliant with their medications. They want help managing their chronic disease. They want to do preventative health and wellness checks. Does that sound familiar? All that's taking place in your communities every day, all day now. That is what you're doing. But none of it's monetized. And none of that value is realized with people that are controlling where these people live in the communities that they go to. The purpose of SLIF is to try to be a bit provocative. All I'm saying is that senior living has a lot bigger role in this continuum. I think it's an opportunity for us, and I think we can go and play a role there. And I think they're going to be absolutely, how many of you have practitioners rounding in your communities today? I see a lot of hands going up. How many of them had them 5 years ago? I see a lot fewer hands going up. Why are they there? Probably because you engaged in some kind of conversation that made that happen. But a lot of them are there because the practitioners are carrying the risk. The payers take their 10 to 15% off the top. They're unloading the risk onto the practitioners. The practitioners know once they follow those residents or the enrollees in their at-risk plans, if they're in there actively engaged with them on a daily basis, they're going to drive down the total cost of care. They care about what's going on in your communities. And as we get and talk in a second here about evolving care models, I'll bring it back together. Analytics and insights. Next, interoperability. Straight up, this is the connectivity and connecting you so that you can share all this data with them efficiently and effectively, real time. And be a part of that greater healthcare ecosystem and insert yourself into that. I personally believe senior living deserves a much bigger seat at that table. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there. There's a lot of opportunity for us to be engaged with people making those decisions. And at the end of the day, everybody wins. Transparency into quality. If you're going to do that, you got to have, be able to provide transparency into quality. It all builds on each other, right? The standardization, transparency into quality performance metrics, transparency with all these other stakeholders. Last but not least, I'll tell this story. We had a cab member. She knows who she is. I promised her I wouldn't say her name, but she's in the room. Our customer advisory board looked at me 2 years ago and said, Travis, as our tech partner, it's not up to you anymore to just tell us where we're at. We kind of have our arms around that. We need you to tell us where we're going. We need to tell you what's gonna happen. Again, all these stages go together. Once you're digitized, once you're standardized, once you have those analytics and stuff in place, now we get to the point where we can start being predictive, and this can be a really powerful asset to your organization. We're already at the point in being able to predict return to hospital. We're gonna be able to, there's other innovative organizations out there that are predicting falls before they're gonna happen. There's all kinds of things. If we know about these things before they happen, we can, number one, provide a heck of a lot better care and living experience to individuals in our communities, but we also bring a lot more value to that bigger ecosystem that I talked about. This is the stuff that you are doing all day, every day, in your communities right now. You don't even have to go back and change this. This is what you do. You make sure your residents are compliant with you make sure that your customers are compliant with their medications. You make sure and you're involved and you have service plans in place to help manage and optimize any chronic diseases that they're dealing with. You're doing preventative health and wellness checks. What you're not doing is sharing that information with others. What you're not doing is helping unleash the value that you're providing to the greater ecosystem. And by the way, there's 2 ways to increase staffing and there's 2 ways to increase occupancy. Number 1, bring more people through the front door. Number 2, slow down the back door, right? If we're doing a good job of this does have an impact on occupancy because you're going to get ahead of big problems faster and they're gonna live in your communities longer. So when you start thinking about a value prop for investment in tech, this certainly is part of it. You look at this quote and you've heard it talked about, Lynn talked about it, Bob talked about it, these social determinants of health. So you read this quote and you say, because at the same time digital transformation is going on, healthcare facilities are also focusing on the social determinants of health and health equity. If you're not familiar with that term, I suggest get familiar with health equity. That is a big term going forward, and I think it's gonna be meaningful to our industry. This came out of a health system, health IT hospital magazine. This didn't come out of a senior living or senior housing or even skilled nursing. Social determinants is a big deal, and there's opportunities for us to do a lot with that. Last but not least, evolving care models. I could have had a long list. I tried to highlight just a few. The pandemic facilitated a lot of this and put gas behind it. Regulation freed up the onset of telehealth and made it easier for physicians to bill. Physicians looked out their windows and instead of full parking lots, they were empty, so they embraced it in a different way. Telehealth, I'm sure, is more prevalent in your day-to-day conversations and operations than it was 2 years ago. What these all have in common, whether it's tech-enabled virtual health, we've got a health system that we work with that has a large benefactor that just donated $500 million for this health system to build out their digital hospital model. What's the point of all of this? SNF skipping, digital hospital, all of it? It's to get people in their home as fast as they can possibly get them there and as safely and securely as they possibly can get them there. And yeah, part of it's probably with the idea of driving down costs. Where are their highest risk enrollees? Where do they live? Where is their home? They live in your communities. They live in independent living communities. They live in assisted living communities. To think that none of this is gonna change our future or the direction or where we're going, I think is a bit naive. I think there's loads of opportunity for us to embrace these evolving care models and figure out where senior living can play a role and what it means and what it can mean for you differentiating your services and the living experience in your communities. Will you watch the future of technology and healthcare transform around you? Or are you gonna be the one leading it? We've seen, and I can tell you, I don't have all the studies and the reports, but people that are embracing this came through that pandemic without the as severe of dips in occupancy. They had other lead sources and other ways to grow their business other than the traditional ones that we've all embraced and been accustomed to. There is an opportunity here. And I think we'll rise and seize it. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Travis. And I agree 100%. You know, we produce content in healthcare as well as senior housing, and we know that the workforce challenge is what everybody's thinking about, but this is just as important. So thank you so much for bringing the content, Travis.